Hey there, Portlanders, Oregonians, lurkers, teachers. So in my last video, I talked about how I consider this kind of an underground or verboten math in that it's just not what's front and center in a current, say, high school curriculum. But here we are in the summer, and there's lots of opportunity for experimentation and going sort of outside the standard lines. This is normal in high school. Now, when you get to actual mainstream high school, if you've listened to, for example, my interview with Mike Achera with Thinking with Mike, he creates a LuxBox product, by the way, and just sent me some because we realized I didn't have the trigons. I've had Lux for a long time, but I didn't have the most recent, latest, and greatest species. For example, we now have little tiny triangular connector pieces, right, in addition to the squares, which I had before, but now I have more colors and more neon. So we can talk more about, like with this toy, the main themes of this channel, which if you've been around here for a while, or you're just getting into it perhaps, it's very geometric in flavor. We talk a lot about polyhedrons, but we also talk about a lattice, a specific lattice. And a lattice is like a repeating pattern in space, kind of like a beehive or a sponge. A sponge is like relative to a lattice. A sponge is more random, but you could say a sponge. There are like the Menger sponge, mathematical sponges that are very regular. So this, look at this. With the trigon pieces, I'm able to make little pentagons which have convexity, concavity. And so for National Pink Day, I was able to make this mostly pink icosahedron. It really is June 23rd, National Pink Day. I don't know who makes up these things. And these trigons let me also do little three connector hubs. In other words, I can bend them tightly enough to do the vertices of a tetrahedron. It's a little bit delicate, but that's fine. It works well. I can go on maybe and do the octahedral tetrahedron truss, an octet truss, what we call an isotropic vector matrix, but we just say IVM. Like, what did XYZ stand for? I think just for the three axes, right? The IVM, you can see it in my backyard and places like that. Something we examine in our curriculum, and that's really what I want to talk about here. And I'm going to wind up with this point too. I'm kind of addressing myself to teachers, and say you are a summer school teacher and you do have a lot of freedom and latitude as to what you introduce as advanced topics in high school math. You're not going to have to go the route of literature teacher, which is what I've been coaching, right? Treat this geometry as embedded in American literature, which is where you'll find it. But if you have a free hand to develop some math segments, here's my suggestion for starters. Do some cryptography as well. This is a cool thing. It's associated with summer camp, secret messages, clubhouse, right? And pick something a little bit difficult like public key cryptography and realize you're already off the beaten track now. With Fermat's Little Theorem and Euler's Theorem, more general version of it in a way, with Fermat's primality test. These are not tough things to cover. They're high school level, but they just don't happen to usually be in an ordinary, at least in my experience, STEM curriculum for high schoolers in, the what do we call them? The regular schools. But this is summer school, and this is you being creative or me being creative. Now here's a book you might, if you're into the Python angle here, and I'm not saying everyone else is, by Maria and Gary Litvin. We used to talk about this on EduSig all the time. and I actually met Maria at least one PyCon, because this was an exciting book, still is in a way, because it does reach the goal of explaining public key cryptography to high schoolers, by the end of the course, which is where I'm heading for my summer school course, which is just starting, right? So I've just been working on this particular page. In a way, I'm starting from scratch, but all this stuff is all over the place, on the internet. So we're being both mainstream and yet a little bit edgy, a little bit outside the boundaries, because it's not normally considered a high school topic, but it's summer. So once you have that as your context, then it's a lot easier to switch gears, I would say, and get a little bit more exotic and jump to polyhedrons, which shouldn't be exotic, but they're often in the back of the book. We call 10th grade geometry our window into geometry. It's very flat, very planar, very Euclidean. We often don't get off the plane at all. So we don't learn icosahedron. And furthermore, with these fancy, expensive computers we have, we don't take advantage of their ability to do 3D graphics, right? So we waste a lot of our technology because we're still teaching as if all we have are calculators or something. And we don't build vectors as mathematical objects. We don't build polyhedrons as mathematical objects. And by mathematical objects, I mean that literally as in object-oriented programming, where we're trying to sort of take apart mathematical objects, say vectors, in terms of source code. Same thing, complex numbers. What are the guts of these things? Let's express that in something that we can interact with that's a lot more intelligible at the end of the day than what a calculator gives us to work with. So we're getting way beyond calculators here, and that's the main thing. We're in Jupyter notebooks, we're in Python, we're on a serious laptop. We're not just on a cell phone calculator or something like that. And that's where you hit what's the real constraint in teaching these things is access to hardware and the ability for kids to develop their own personal workspace, safe, secure, and where they have the freedom to actually just bliss out and study at some point in their lives, because we all need that. You need that even if you have a cushy job in a corporate suite corner office, right? You still need to study if you're especially in a tech field. You don't just get to kick back and say, now I know everything and I will run things now. It doesn't work that way usually anymore. So here in recap is what I'm suggesting. You, the creative math teacher who have some freedom in the summer to do as you please, as long as it's relevant to the high school curriculum, let's say that's your goal. Well, you can get there starting with well-known topics in cryptography, i.e. public key, RSA in particular is what I'm suggesting. Elliptic curve, if you're into that, right? Just pick something like that that's a little bit hard and use the theoretical. I think, with RSA, you've got so much good fundamental math to talk about. Fundamental theorem of arithmetic, prime versus composite, Fermat's little theorem, primality tests, clearly accessible to high schoolers. Just really much more on the lambda calc side if you've seen that video of mine. So once you've opened the space with this clearly relevant material, because obviously public key crypto is at the heart of the internet and internet commerce, you've got no problem with relevance. You call this supermarket math if you want. Look at my earlier videos. Once you've opened that space, then you can also be a little bit different in terms of where you go with the polyhedrons, how you treat your geometry. And here I'm suggesting, if you're brave, you might actually want to bring up like quadratic coordinates. Check them out in Wikipedia. They're big on my channel. They're fun, they're unusual, and they're kind of a level the playing field device, in that no matter what your background in math, you probably haven't come across this particular, no, these are not quaternions, by the way. Do not confuse quadrats with quaternions. But again, quaternions, given computers, given all that we have in computers, wouldn't be out of reach either. I've done some of this. I've worked in quaternions around here some places because they're used in video games, computer games to rotate stuff. You don't have to use a matrix. You can sandwich your vectors between quaternions and get a faster rotation. Got other pages on that. A lot of this sounds like college stuff, and that's the point. This is advanced high school. And you're mixing in the Bucky Fuller stuff, and you're giving the right impression that we're getting ahead by doing this, right? And we're leaving people behind, but they have opportunity to catch up. We're going to be always lending them a helping hand. All right, that's my advice, and we'll talk to you soon.